I'm going to look now at an element of research question 1 where I'm looking at the representation of disabled people, beginning with the UK press. In terms of the methods that I'll be using, it's quite straightforward for you now. I'm going to be using frequency information and also, of course, importantly, collocation. To a lesser extent in the study, you'll see I use keywords. But just frequency and collocation, how far can we get with that? Well, within research question 1, of course, we needed once again to define our terms. What were we looking for? Well, we were interested in seeing whether preferred terms for referring to disabled people were actually on the increase, and if that was anyway promoted by the Paralympic movement, and similarly whether dispreferred terms were in decline. And we also had another category that we looked at, politically correct terms. Now, you can see the terms there in front of you, the slide in each category. Where do we get those from? Well, in this case, of course, we were fortunate that we could draw upon research done for the Office for Disability in the UK, and we put the URL on the website here for you so that you can go and read that report too, which actually did the categorization for us. So sometimes you're fortunate and you get your categories for free, which we did in this case. Okay, so what about preferred naming? If we just look at the UK data and we look over time at the years that we've looked at from 2005 through to the end of 2012, what's happening with these preferred naming strategies? Well, typically, as you can see, they are on the increase. Note, however, I can't just rely on raw frequencies. If I do, I quickly draw false conclusions. Why? Because, say, for example, in the year of the Paralympics, 2012, much more is written about disabled people, and consequently you get more examples. We have to normalize, once again, to mentions per million words so that we can start to compare those years. But you can see, for example, for the first, second, and third preferred naming strategy, the year in which they're most frequent relative to the other years is actually the year of the Paralympics, 2012. It's only in the case of person with a disability that we see a very notable increase, but nonetheless there was a peak in the past that was higher. But nonetheless the trend is fairly clear. The year of the Paralympics seems to be suggesting an increase in these preferred naming strategies. But you might say, well, actually that might have all happened in January 2012 and it was nothing to do with the Paralympics. So let's look at that data by month. Looking at it again, we can see that actually the peaks in this data, and we'll look at the frequency per million, actually are in the months August and September typically, or July, August and September. Why? Well, of course, the Paralympic Games ran in London from the 29th of August 2012 to the 9th of September 2012. So those are exactly the points where we would expect to see a peak occurring in preferred naming strategies if we were going to claim any type of link through to the Paralympic movement, and it is there. Well, hopefully we'd see the reverse happening with the dispreferred terms. We'd see them being driven out by an event like the Paralympics. If we look by year, well, again, we seem to get some evidence that this might be the case. Crippled, handicapped, crippled, wheelchair-bound, the lowest usages occur in the year of the Paralympic Games. It's only confined to a wheelchair where that doesn't apply, and actually that's the second lowest usage. But again, let's look by month. If it's the Paralympics driving out these mentions, we might expect to see the dip, if you like, in the use of those words occur in those crucial months in which the Paralympics were held. And if we look in the table, we find that that is pretty much the case for crippled, handicapped, and cripple. And certainly when we look in the last 3 months of the year for all of those terms, we're seeing figures that are significantly suppressed with reference to earlier in the year. So let's just reflect back on what we saw in those 4 tables. The frequency of the preferred group tends to be increasing, with a minor dip in frequency in 2009, followed by a major spike in 2012. The 2012 data has the largest overall frequency of preferred items. And the decline of the dispreferred group indicates a greater awareness in usage of terminology, I would suggest, and certainly better adherence to those guidelines, which you can read on our website. So I would say that we have some evidence here, and it's useful evidence, that the Paralympics promotes mentions of disability that select preferred naming strategies in the media, and that the Paralympics suppressed the use of dispreferred naming strategies. The mechanics around that were probably newsrooms interacting with the guidance they were getting from government much more sensitively and much more frequently in the context of the Paralympics, but note in those months after the Paralympics that usage continues. So it seems there's a longer term effect here.